This is our bi-monthly speaker series called Durango Diaries. Tonight is our 8th presentation called Tales of Immigration. Danny Quinlan is Executive Director of Compañeros, Corners Immigrant Resource Center here in Durango and greater areas. He has worked with immigrant and Spanish-speaking populations in Southwest Colorado since 2010. His passion for justice and human rights called him to this line of work.
You know, I kind of struggled a little bit to figure out what story I was going to tell tonight. Just by my nature, I'm really good with statistics, and I could give you a rundown of the laws, I could tell you all kinds of information, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here for information. We're here for a story. So I thought a long time about what story I was going to tell, and what I finally decided to tell was my story of how I became involved in this work. I was born in the United States, and both my parents were born in the United States, and of my grandparents, 3 of them were born in the United States. So the refugee or immigrant experience is not something that I grew up with. I am an outsider in the kind of work that I do. And yeah, I was born in the United States. I'm a white male. I have pretty much every privilege you could imagine. And that, I think, has a lot to do with why I decided to do the kind of work that I do. And I'm not here to say that I have figured out the solution to this issue or that I have an example for other people to follow. I just thought that maybe some of my experience might be instructive or hopefully entertaining. We'll see. I was born in Colorado, in Niwot. I was born in the 80s. And so as a child, this wasn't an issue that I had direct experience with. Pretty much everyone at my elementary school looked like me. Pretty much everyone at my middle school looked like me. High school was a little different. I went to Boulder High, and I started to make friends. I had friends from South Asia, East Asia, all over Europe, Latin America, Sudan. I started to figure out I really like hanging out with these people. Didn't really know why yet. I didn't really have any particular awareness of the legality or the politics behind any of it. And that just kind of sat on the back burner for me. The moment that I decided that I was going to have to do something about this was in about 2006. And I had recently graduated from college, and I took a job. I moved to Durango in March of that year, and I took a job with the Conservation Corps, now Conservation Legacy, a great organization just down there. And one of my projects involved working on the Continental Divide Trail in southern New Mexico. And on our way down to get to that point where we were going to be working, we got stopped by Border Patrol several times. And we got out, you know, if you know the Continental Divide Trail, it's way out there. You get off the interstate and go about maybe 2 more hours on dirt roads towards the border. And that's where our base camp was. And we had a big white van, and so we attracted a lot of attention. And I remember one day, you know, in that part of the trail, you're not really building a trail, you're just pounding in T-posts every quarter mile or so. And so we were just walking across the desert carrying T-posts. You know, I was fit and had been working all summer, so I was in good shape. I could have walked to the interstate maybe in 2 days. It was probably a 2-day walk from the border to where we were. And there was a lot of evidence of people going through that area. There was a lot of clothes, empty water bottles, backpacks, things left in the desert partially covered by sand. And up until that point, this had always been a really abstract thing to me. I had only known about statistics, right? I knew such and such number of people coming across the border per year or coming from such and such country. But seeing the actual evidence of human lives made it a little bit more real for me. And there was one particular moment. I looked down and I saw a shoe. It wasn't It wasn't a big adult shoe, it was about this big, and it was bright pink. And I realized that that belonged to a little girl, I assume. And I thought about, I'm in good shape, maybe I could walk to the interstate in 2 days. And this was a 5 or 6-year-old girl. And at that time, I didn't have kids. Right now, I have kids, and my son is 5 years old. And I think about, and he's an excellent hiker. He's he grew up here. He's very active. I think about him being in an area like that. And that touches a soft spot for me. I'm getting a little choked up thinking about that. But that's when I realized that we're not talking about numbers. We're not talking about statistics or aliens or illegals. We're talking about human beings with lives, with families, with little daughters who apparently lost a shoe somewhere in the desert. And that was hard to wrap my mind around. And so my initial response was to ignore it. And because I have all this privilege, I could ignore it. I could walk away. I didn't have to think about it the way that many, many people have to think about this every single day. They can't get away from it. I had the luxury of walking away and turning my back on that, and I did that for several years. But it kept eating at me, and so when I finally left the wilderness profession, I decided I wanted to do something to mitigate this vast difference in privilege that I was experiencing. The way that I started that was by, I went to the Durango Adult Education Center and I just said, I want to volunteer in your English classes. I don't care, I don't want to get paid, I just want to go, I just want to meet people and talk to people. And so I helped a lot of people learn English, and at the same time I improved my Spanish skills, and I really started to meet a lot of these people. And again, moving away from thinking about numbers and statistics and more towards people, that made a big difference in the way that I think about not just immigration, but any political issue. It's instructive to think about the people. At that time, that was about 2009, 2010 that I started to do that. And at that time, a lot of people I think would probably have the perception that things are worse now than they have ever been. And that doesn't align with my experience, actually. In 2010, Colorado had some very strict laws. And we also had a program called 287G. And that program allowed state patrol officers to make arrests for immigration. And that was active at that time. And when I first started to get involved with some of the families that I continue to work with, in those days we were losing people left and right. People were getting pulled over for a burnout taillight and right into the deportation machine. That was a difficult time. I met a lot of people whose family members, friends, who had been picked up. There's a couple of cases that really kind of stood out to me, and I'm going to be very careful in sharing some experiences from other people because this is a small town. In my organization, we do know your rights trainings, and we help people understand what their legal rights are. You have the right to remain silent, for example. You have the right to an attorney, things like that. And I remember we did a Know Your Rights training with a family, and we explained that you don't have to open the door. If immigration knocks on your door and they don't have a warrant, you're not required to open the door. And so the guy knew this. A week later, more or less, he got picked up. And what had happened was his daughter opened the door. I don't remember how old she was. She was a teenager. She didn't go to that Know Your Rights training. She didn't know that she didn't have to open the door. Someone knocked on the door, she opened it, and her dad got deported. And she was a teenager. She was born here. She is now in Mexico with her dad. They decided to all go with him. And last time I heard from them, which was about a year, 2 years ago, they were having a very difficult time enrolling her in school because she was not a Mexican citizen. She didn't have any Mexican paperwork, and she was not eligible to apply to get enrolled in school. She spoke Spanish at home, but not at a high school level. She didn't know how to read in Spanish or write in Spanish. And she was a bright kid. You know, she was born here. She has a U.S. passport. She can come back, and she might. I think she's about 17 at this point. So we'll see what she decides to do with her life. But that was a really difficult thing to watch happen. I also had an experience with a family that was mixed status. You know, there's this perception out there that if you marry a U.S. citizen, you're good. You're just good. You're fine. You're done. That is not the case. And this undocumented individual was married to a woman who was a member of a tribe. I don't remember which tribe, actually, but they were married legally, and the dad was undocumented. They had a daughter together, and they were pregnant. And the dad had left work to go to the hospital to watch the ultrasound. On his way to the hospital, he was in a car accident, and he died. The mother tried to apply for Social Security benefits because he had been here. He was undocumented, but he had been here for years. He had worked. He had paid into Social Security. The wife was a citizen. The 2 children were citizens. She wanted to apply for survivor benefits, and she was denied because of her husband's status. I could go on for hours with these experiences that I witnessed secondhand. There's a lot, and this kind of stuff happens all the time. And I think back to those 3 years that I spent after seeing that shoe in the desert, how I spent the 3 years just willfully, blissfully ignorant. And I just can't do that anymore. These experiences are too real for me. The people that are affected are my friends. I consider them family members. And so this is where I'm going to end, and I'm trying to think of a good way to conclude. Like I said, I'm not here to give any great solutions or answers to how to fix any of this or what to do with privilege if you feel like you need to do something with it. All I can say is the perspective of humans, of human lives, that was the turning point for me, and I think the more people that start to think about this issue in terms of human lives and not in terms of aliens or whatever term you want to apply, if you can just have a moment like that with a shoe in the desert, that's the only way we're going to make progress on this issue. Thank you.